Nicolaus of Kues, also referred to as Nicolaus Cusanus and Nicolaus of Cusa, was a German philosopher, theologian, jurist, and astronomer. One of the first German proponents of Renaissance humanism, he made spiritual and political contributions in European history. A notable example of this is his mystical or spiritual writings on learned ignorance, as well as his participation in power struggles between Rome and the German states of the Holy Roman Empire. Papal legate to Germany from 1446, he was appointed cardinal for his merits by Pope Nicolaus V in 1448 and Prince-Bishop of Brixen 2 years later. In 1459 he became Vicar General in the Papal States. Nicolaus of Cusa has remained an influential figure during the period 2000–2001. His sixth centennial of his birth was celebrated on 4 continents and commemorated by publications on his life and work. Nicolaus of Cusa. Kues was the second of 4 children of Johann Krebs and Katharina Roma. His father was a prosperous boat owner and ferryman. He entered the Faculty of Arts of the Heidelberg University in 1416 as a cleric of the Diocese of Trier, studying the liberal arts. He seemed to have left Heidelberg soon afterwards, as he received his doctorate in canon law from the University of Padua in 1423. In Padua, he met with the later cardinals Julian Cesarini and Domenico Capranica and became friends with the mathematician Paolo dal Pozzo Toscanelli. Afterwards, he entered the University of Cologne in 1425 as a doctor of canon law, which he appears to have both taught and practiced there. In Cologne, he made friends with the scholastic theologian Aymeric de Campo. Following a brief period in Cologne, Nicolaus returned to his hometown and became secretary to Otto of Ziegenhain, the Prince Archbishop of Trier. Otto appointed him canon and dean at the Stift of St. Florinus in Koblenz, affiliated with numerous prebends. In 1427 he was sent to Rome as an episcopal delegate. The next year he traveled to Paris to study the writings of Ramon Lull. At the same time he rejected a calling by the newly established University of Leuven. He acquired great knowledge in the research of ancient and medieval manuscripts as well as in textual criticism and the examination of primary sources. In 1433 he identified the donation of Constantine as a fake, confirmed by Lorenzo Valla a few years later, and revealed the forgery of the pseudo-Isidorian decretals. He made friends with the Austrian astronomer Georg von Puebach and advocated a reform of the Julian calendar and the Easter computers, which, however, was not realized until the introduction of the Gregorian calendar in 1582. After the Archbishop Otto of Trier had died in 1430, Pope Martin V appointed the Speyer Bishop Raben of Helmstadt his successor. Nevertheless, the electorate was contested by opposing parties, and in 1432 Nicolaus attended the Council of Basel representing the Cologne Dean Ulrich von Manderscheid, one of the claimants, who hoped to prevail against the new Pope Eugene IV. Nicolaus stressed the determining influence of the cathedral chapter and its given right to participate in the succession policy, which even places the Pope under an obligation to seek a consent. His efforts were to no avail in regard to Ulrich's ambitions. However, Nicolaus' pleadings earned him a great reputation as an intermediary and diplomat. While present at the council, he wrote his first work, De Concordantia Catholica, a synthesis of ideas on church and empire balancing hierarchy with consent. This work remained useful to critics of the papacy long after Nicolaus left Basel. Initially as conciliarist, Nicolaus approached his university friend Cardinal Julian Cesarini, who had tried to reconcile Pope and Council, combining reform and hierarchy. hierarchic order. Nicolaus supported transfer of the council to Italy to meet with the Greeks who needed aid against the Ottoman Turks. He arbitrated in the conflict with the Hussites. Between the summer of 1437 and early 1438 he was a member of the delegation sent to Constantinople with the Pope's approval to bring back the Byzantine Emperor and his representatives to the papally summoned Council of Florence of 1439, which was attempting to bring the Eastern Orthodox Church into union with the Western Catholic Church. The reunion achieved at this conference turned out to be very brief. Nicolaus would later claim that he had chosen to write on this metaphysical topic because of a shipboard experience of divine illumination while on the ship returning from this mission to Constantinople. After a successful career as a papal envoy, he was made a cardinal by Pope Nicolaus V in 1448–1449. In 1450 he was both named Bishop of Brixen, in Tyrol, and commissioned as a papal legate to the German lands to spread the message of reform. This latter role, his great legation of 1452, involved travel of almost 3,000 miles, preaching, teaching and reforming. He became known as the Hercules of the Eugenian cause. His local councils enacted reforms, many of which were not successful. Pope Nicolaus cancelled some of Nicolaus' decrees, and the effort to discourage pilgrimages to venerate the bleeding hosts of Wilsnack was unsuccessful. His work as bishop between 1452 and 1458 trying to impose reforms and reclaim lost diocesan revenues was opposed by Duke Sigismund of Austria. The Duke imprisoned Nicolaus in 1460, for which Pope Pius II excommunicated Sigismund and laid an interdict on his lands. Nicolaus of Cusa returned to Rome, but was never able to return to his bishopric. He died at Todi on the 11th of August 1464. Sigmund's capitulation in 1464 came a few days after Nicolaus's death at Todi in Umbria. Upon his death, Cusanus's body was interred in the church of San Pietro in Vincoli in Rome, probably near the relic of Peter's chains, but it was later lost. His monument with a sculpted image of the cardinal remains. Two other tombstones, one medieval and one modern, also are found in the church. In accordance with his wishes, his heart rests within the chapel altar at the Cusanus Stift in Kues. To this charitable institution that he had founded he bequeathed his entire inheritance. It still stands, and serves the purpose Nicolaus intended for it, as a home for the aged. The Cusanus Stift houses also many of his manuscripts. Nicolaus was widely read, and his works were published in the 16th century in both Paris and Basel. 16th-century French scholars, including Jacques Lefebvre de Taples and Charles de Beauvel, cited him. Lefebvre even edited the Paris 1514 opera. Nonetheless, there was no Cusan school, and his works were largely unknown until the 19th century, though Giordano Bruno quoted him, while some thinkers, like Gottfried Leibniz, were thought to have been influenced by him. Neo-Kantian scholars began studying Nicolaus in the 19th century, and new editions were begun by the Heidelberger Akademie der Wissenschaften in the 1930s and published by Felix Meiner Verlag. In the early 20th century, he was hailed as the first modern thinker, and much debate since then has centered around the question whether he should be seen as essentially a medieval or Renaissance figure. Societies and centers dedicated to Cusanus can be found in Argentina, Japan, Germany, Italy and the United States. Philosophy. Nicolaus of Cusa was noted for his deeply mystical writings about Christianity, particularly on the possibility of knowing God with the divine human mind, not possible through mere human means, via learned ignorance. Cusanus wrote of the enfolding of creation in God and their unfolding in creation. He was suspected by some of holding pantheistic beliefs, but his writings were never accused of being heretical. Physicist and philosopher Max Bernhard Weinstein wrote that Nicolaus was, to a certain extent, a pandeist. Nicolaus also wrote in De Conjecturis about using conjectures as surmises to rise to better understanding of the truth. The individual might rise above mere reason to the vision of the intellect, but the same person might fall back from such vision. Theologically, Nicolaus anticipated the profound implications of Reform teaching on the harrowing of hell, followed by Pico della Mirandola, who similarly explained the descensus in terms of Christ's agony. Science and mathematics. Most of Nicolaus of Cusa's mathematical ideas can be found in his essays, De Docta Ignorantia, Divisione Dei and on conjectures. He also wrote on squaring the circle in his mathematical treatises. For the Catholic Encyclopedia, the astronomical views of the cardinal are scattered through his philosophical treatises. They evince complete independence of traditional doctrines, though they are based on symbolism of numbers, on combinations of letters, and on abstract speculations rather than observation. The Earth is a star like other stars, is not the center of the universe, is not at rest, nor are its poles fixed. The celestial bodies are not strictly spherical, nor are their orbits circular. The difference between theory and appearance is explained by relative motion. Had Copernicus been aware of these assertions, he would probably have been encouraged by them to publish his own monumental work. Like Nicole Orsma, Nicolaus of Cusa also wrote about the possibility of the plurality of worlds. Norman Moore, M.D., tells us in the Fitzpatrick Lectures of 1905, in medicine he introduced an improvement which in an altered form has continued in use to this day. This improvement was the counting of the pulse, which up to his time had been felt and discussed in many ways but never counted. Nicolaus of Cusa proposed to compare the rate of pulses by weighing the quantity of water run out of a water clock while the pulse beat 100 times. The manufacture of watches with second hands has since given us a simpler method of counting, but the merit of introducing this useful kind of observation into clinical medicine belongs to Nicolaus of Cusa. Politics. In 1433, Nicolaus proposed reform of the Holy Roman Empire and a method to elect Holy Roman emperors. Although it was not adopted by the Church, his method was essentially the same one known today as the border count, which is used in many academic institutions, competitions, and even some political jurisdictions, in original form and a number of variations. His proposal preceded Borda's work by over 3 centuries. Nicolaus' opinions on the empire, which he hoped to reform and strengthen, were cited against papal claims of temporal power in the 16th and 17th centuries. Protestant writers were happy to cite a cardinal against Rome's pretensions. Protestants, however, found his writings against the Hussites wrong. Nicolaus seemed to Protestants to give the Church too much power to interpret Scripture, instead of treating it as self-interpreting and self-sufficient for salvation, the principle of Sola Scriptura. Nicolaus' own thought on the Church changed with his departure from Basel. He tried arguing that the Basel Assembly lacked the consent of the Church throughout the world, especially the princes. Then he tried arguing that the Church was unfolded from Peter. This allowed him to support the Pope without abandoning ideas of reform. Thus he was able to propose to Pius II reform of the Church, beginning with the Pope himself. Then it was to spread through the Roman Curia and outward throughout Christendom. Nicolaus of Cusa noted that government was founded on the consent of the governed. Accordingly, since by nature all men are free, any authority by which subjects are prevented from doing evil and their freedom is restrained to doing good through fear from penalties, comes solely from harmony and from the consent of the subjects, whether the authority reside in written law or in the living law which is in the ruler. For if by nature men are equally strong and equally free, the true and settled power of one over the others, the ruler having equal natural power, could be set up only by the choice and consent of the others, just as a law also is set up by consent. Nicolaus and other religions. Shortly after the fall of Constantinople in 1453, Nicolaus wrote De Pace Fide, on the Peace of Faith. This visionary work imagined a summit meeting in heaven of representatives of all nations and religions. Islam and the Hussite movement in Bohemia are represented. The conference agrees that there can be una religia in varietate regium, of single faith manifested in different rites, as manifested in the Eastern and Western rites of the Catholic Church. The dialogue presupposes the greater accuracy of Christianity but gives respect to other religions. Less ironic but not virulent is Cusanus' Acribratia al-Qur'ani, sifting the Quran, a detailed review of the Quran in Latin translation. While the arguments for the superiority of Christianity are still shown in this book, it also credits Judaism and Islam with sharing in the truth at least partially. Cusanus' attitude toward the Jews was not always mild. On the 21st of September 1451 he ordered that Jews of Arnhem were wear badges identifying them as such. The De Pace Fide mentions the possibility that the Jews might not embrace the larger union of una religia in varietate rituum, but it dismisses them as politically insignificant. This matches the decrees from Cusanus, a legation restricting Jewish activities, restrictions later cancelled by Pope Nicolaus V. Works. Nicolaus of Cusa wrote a large number of works, which include De Auctoritate Praesidendi in Concilio Generali, a proposal for resolving the question of presidency over the deliberations of the Council of Basel; De Concordantia Catholica, a synthesis of ideas on church and empire balancing hierarchy with consent; Reparatio Calendarii, a plan for reforming the church's calendar; De Docta Ignorantia, De Conjecturis, Dialogus Concludens Magisterum, an ecclesiological explanation of his papal advocacy; De Deo Abscondito, De Querenda Diem, De Date Patris Luminum, De Transmutationibus Geometricis, De Arithmetricis Complementis, De Filiatione Dei, De Genesa, Apologia Doctae Ignorantiae, a response to charges of heresy and pantheism by the Heidelberg scholastic theologian John Wenck in a work entitled De Ignota Literatura, Idiotada Ment. This is formed of 4 dialogues, De Sapientiae 2, De Ment 3, and De Staticis Experimentis IV, De Visione Dei, completed at the request of the monks of the Benedictine Abbey at Tegernsee. De Pace Fide, written in response to the news of the fall of Constantinople to the Turks; De Theologicis Complementis, in which he pursued his continuing fascination with theological applications of mathematical models; Caesaria Circuli Quadratura; De Barillo, a brief epistemological treatise using a beryl or transparent stone as the crucial analogy; De Equalitate; De Principio, Reformatio Generalis, a treatise on the general reform of the Church, written at the request of Pope Pius II, but generally ignored by the Pope and cardinals; De Possessed, Acribratia al-Qur'ani, a Christocentric evaluation of the Quran written at the request of Pope Pius II, based on the 12th century translation of Robert of Catin; De Non Aliud, De Venatione Sapientiae, De Ludo Globa, Compendium, De Mathematicis Complementis, De Apice Theoriae, his last work. Modern editions Opera Omnia ed. E. Hoffmann et al., Acta Cusanus, ed. Eric Muthen and Hermann Haller. On Learned Ignorance, tr. J. Hopkins, Jasper Hopkins, Nicolaus of Cues' Dialectical Mysticism, Text, Translation, and Interpretive Study of Division.A. Dialectical Mysticism, Tr. J. Hopkins, De Auctoritate Praesidendi in Concilio Generali, Tr. H. L. Bonde al. Church History 59, 19-34. De Concordantia Catholica, Tr. P. Sigmund, Cambridge Texts in the History of Political Thought. I Miscellany on Nicolaus of Cusa, Tr. J. Hopkins, On Wisdom and Knowledge, Tr. J. Hopkins, Metaphysical Speculations, Tr. J. Hopkins, 2 vols. Bond, H. Lawrence, Nicolaus of Cusa, Selected Spiritual Writings, Classics of Western Spirituality. ISBN 0809136988. Hopkins, Jasper, Complete Philosophical and Theological Treatises of Nicolaus of Cusa, 2 vols. Izbitsky, Thomas M. ed. Nicolaus of Cusa, Writings on Church and Reform.